Thank you for joining the Missing Half podcast, where we're discovering what's missing in manufacturing and B2B marketing. Today, I have with us Jeff Swartz, a longtime friend and expert in geofencing marketing and fellow agency owner. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see you and good to get back together here in the Berg. We're here in Pittsburgh, where Jeff and I met. We were just reminiscing probably 8-9 years ago, somewhere in that range. And Jeff, you own a marketing agency as well in a little different vertical and focus space than we are in. But we've certainly shared some war stories, referred clients over the years, and been in a lot of different situations together and learned a lot.
So yeah, we definitely met in our infancy stages of our businesses, and now we're coming up on a decade of doing it. So it's been a cool journey to see you and your growth, as well as I know share with what's been going on for me as well too.
Yeah, it's great. And you guys, just checking out you guys' stuff here recently and the people I'm engaged with at your organization, a lot of growth for you guys, a lot of new faces I saw at the recent company retreat, which is exciting, right? And so yeah, congratulations on your 10 years and your growth and your recent birthday. Like big days here all in a row stacking up for you. That's great.
Yeah, a lot of big days.
So Jeff, let's start. I'd like to start with every guest and get a little background. Start with maybe that educational experience, whether it was college or post-college, or what kind of led you to be an entrepreneur and start your own agency and get into that space, which is then going to lead us into obviously Qujam, geofencing, and that whole experience. But let's start at the beginning, not so far back, but the middle maybe. We'll start in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 39 now, so actually it's about dead center in the middle. So when I was 20, I went to University of Dayton and studied communications with minors in marketing and sociology. And when I went there, I was between zoology, which they didn't really have a program for that, and advertising. Those were just the two fields that I wanted to look at. And I had a great internship with a small agency out there called The Next Wave. And it made me fall in love with the different aspects of agency life, of creative and business and strategy and media, kind of all mixed into it. And at that point, I said, I want to run this. I don't want to do just one thing in here. I want to know a lot about all these different moving parts, and I want to run it. So I spent almost 10 years at CBS Television as a media buyer and planner for like Church's Chicken, or I guess it's Church's Texas Chicken now, Zales Jewelry, Shoney's, and a few other things, get into real estate investing. We know we bonded over the home improvement side of things in the past, and all led up to get debt free and launch my agency in 2014. And that's kind of the journey to get to the point of the entrepreneurship. It was just always kind of in me. It was always something I wanted to do. And I really approached it with, if it doesn't work out in a year, it was something that I was a 10-year dream, and that I got to see it through and go through that. And I just got lucky and roll up the sleeves and put in some hard work to have it turn into a decade-long dream so far.
No, that's great. Well, congratulations on that story. I know you've, just like every entrepreneur, you've had your peaks and valleys. We've all come through those struggles, but that's part of it. I always tell my kids, it's not about winning, but it's about going through the process. And if it's hard, it's good, because fewer people are going to follow you, and you just need to keep grinding. So,
yeah, don't look at the actual line graph. Look at the slope, right?
Yes.
As long as it's going upwards and everything, even though it's got all these steps and peaks and valleys and stuff, you're in good shape.
Jeff, maybe talk just a little bit about that experience at CBS. I know, one of the experiences I always thought was amazing that you have was buying in big markets and dealing with some really big planning for some big brands.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about how, that wasn't your first step in the entrepreneurial journey from a standpoint of being an entrepreneur, but that first job maybe, right, really laid a good foundation for you to expand what you did in the future.
Yeah. So, I've been in Pittsburgh for 13 years now, but before that I was in Dallas. So 5th biggest TV market in the country. So I was with CBS there and in Pittsburgh, and then I was with the agency down there as well too. So I bought small markets, I bought big markets. I was part of a national TV buy. So I did a bunch of different things, and what I kind of realized is that there's not a lot of differences between the two. There's a lot of similarities, but there's decompartmentalizing of whenever you get to a massive scale. So one of the things that I really did not enjoy that much as working on a bigger project is I was in the media department. I didn't know what was going on 100% with creative or sales or, all these different things. And this was a while ago. This was probably 13 years ago. So things have definitely evolved and changed. It's
Different time, sure.
Yeah. But I didn't like the fact that I didn't know the results from a sales standpoint. So I could tell you the post-buy analysis and all these technical terms to make sure that the gross rating points or what I bought is what I actually got and that we delivered on that. But I was like, well, how many chicken sales did we actually get? Like, how were profits up? And I was curious about that aspect, which I think is the entrepreneur in me. And my specialty at my agency is to focus on hyper-local and to focus on advertising budgets that are anywhere between $50,000 annually and upwards to the low millions,
Sure.
A couple millions and in between there. So 6 figures is like a nice little sweet spot for us. It's a big enough budget that we can do a lot of different things with, but it's a small enough budget where we can have that cross collaboration that gets a little bit lost whenever there is something that becomes too big. You have this $50 million media spend with creative and all these other components. It becomes very labor intensive and too decompartmentalized.
Sure. So this experience in dealing with the budget ranges that you're dealing with, Jeff, it feels like that was one of the reasons why you got into geofencing. Mm-hmm. You started to explore, and we're always, as agency owners, we're always looking for niches that we can find that can outperform and do a better job for our clients and kind of give us that leading edge. Mm-hmm. So maybe talk about how, you started to investigate and test and learn about geofencing, and then we'll get down into some nitty gritty. Because one of the things we try and do with our podcast is we like to start from beginner and then go as far as we can.
Yep.
So because I guarantee there are people, we get questions from some of our clients about geofencing. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking. So we can provide value to marketing managers so they can, kind of level up on that knowledge. We will also have people who watch this podcast and they'll be like, geo who? Isn't that geocaching? Do you mean? Nope, it's not geocaching, it's geofencing. So if you could maybe talk about how you started your interest in it, into geofencing, and then we'll get into the what's and the hows and the wherefores of geofencing.
Yeah, so there's a couple things in there, and if it's cool, I'd actually like to start with the what is geofencing.
Perfect.
First,
do it
to give that example. So geofencing, as we refer to it, is using hyper specific location data, mainly GPS data, to identify that somebody's been at a very specific location. So if we're going to talk in the industrial sector and I'm interested in 100 different potential buyers that I know where their offices is, I'm going to geofence those locations. If I'm going to switch gears and talk about maybe a automotive client that has a big client customer list, maybe we'll grab that and we'll do addressable geofencing, which automatically grabs the property lines around there. Either way, and there's a couple different formats that we use, but either way, it's all about something that's been a very specific location. And we're talking about accuracy down to about 16 feet or roughly. But there's a lot of factors that makes it a pro and a con that you can kind of use it for. And then what you end up doing is that's the targeting side of things. Well, okay, where does the advertising side of things come into play? Great. We know that we have this basket of potential devices and devices that are connected to devices that we captured. So if my cell phone was captured, well, then I can maybe be served a ad on my TV or my tablet or my computer if it's connected to that device as well too. We're talking about banner ads or display ads. We're talking about video pre-roll ads, which is a little commercial that runs before maybe like a news video that you're going to be watching, OTT CTV, Hulu, Roku, Sling TV, commercials that are on those streaming services, digital audio as well too. So if I'm streaming iHeart or a podcast or something like that, then the commercial that gets interjected in those places. But the targeting is based off of location, but then the distribution is those kind of programmatic distribution into those ad platforms. So that's in a nutshell what geofencing is. How I got into it is you and I actually had a parallel that was happening. You were ahead of me where you were like, I want a niche. I want to be specialized in something. And you went category with the industry. And I was like, I like that, but I'm stubborn and I like working in a lot of industries. So right, wrong, and indifferent. My niche was the budget niche, but also that more hyper localized kind of component. And with that, I had to dive deep into digital. And if I'm going to talk hyper local, well, one of the best tools is geofencing for me to be able to have that extra hyper local level. There's a lot of other resources and strategies that we use from a media advertising distribution standpoint, but we specialize in paid advertising. That's the main thing that we do. So we're like, okay, let's get this geofencing thing figured out. And what I kind of realized is that there are so many middle people in advertising, and especially in the geofencing space, that it was very common at the time for an agency to buy from somebody who's buying from somebody who's buying from somebody who's buying from the demand side platform that was actually buying from the exchanges. I'm not exaggerating that. And
I remember a couple of attempts we had at campaigns with clients, and we were just like, how can it be this expensive? And it was because there's so many mouths to feed in that whole process. So yeah, absolutely. We experienced that many years ago. We experienced that challenge.
Yeah. And it's wild because I saw everything from, I'm going to say cost per thousand. So the cost to have 1,000 impressions, if I'm going to say banner ads. So, to have your ad be seen 1,000 times, I've seen the price be as little as, $4 or $5 when you're super ultra direct, all the way up to $15. And that's a big gap. And just like, $5, $15, that's not big of a deal. Well, when you're buying hundreds of thousands of impressions, millions of impressions, that adds up quite a lot to where you can literally get, 2x the number of impressions, 3x the number of impressions for the same amount of money. So what we did is we strategically started trying to figure out, well, where do we need to get to leapfrog all of these middle people to get to the point where we're actually doing this in-house. So that's where we kind of started that journey. We got to a point where we invested in having people in-house that can have the time to do it, that we're spending a minimum amount, which is about $250,000 on the platform to give us the direct service that we need. And it took time to ramp up to that and build up to that. Now, luckily, that platform can do other things as well, too, other targeting components for us, such as keyword targeting and site retargeting and third-party data, first-party data overlays. But geofencing was one of those things where, hey, we think we have something here that's kind of unique. And then people just kept asking for it. We struck a nice little handshake deal with geofencing.com and started getting their leads. Our partners were like, hey, can you do this for us? Other agencies have come to us and said, hey, you can do this more cost effectively and better, and we actually understand it because you'll sit down and explain it to us, than other things as well too. So we started developing this reputation around geofencing, which caused us to say, okay, well, we're having hundreds of conversations in this space. Maybe there's something here that we can open it up. And that's what led us to not only dive into using other people's technology, but overlaying with our own technology to make it accessible to really anybody now.
That's great. And I think when I think back to some of those early days, and we were part of that journey a little bit, just in a very small way early on, where we saw that layering of service providers, and then the fact that you innovated and you went and figured it out. And then before we get into more of the details of geofencing, let's just talk about where that led you to the next step beyond Ethic Ads. It moved you into starting your own company around geofencing, Qujam. So maybe let's talk about that before we get into all the nitty-gritty educational content about geofencing.
Yeah. So Ethic Advertising Agency is an ad agency that's focused on paid advertising and the creative services that support that: video, animation, graphic design, website development, those kind of things. So we were having all these conversations. We were having to require minimum spend in order for us to do what we need to do, because we were really hands-on. And we were starting to have so many geofencing focused conversations because our reputation in the space was preceding us, that years ago I was like, wouldn't it be great if I could, send them somewhere that they can get help? The people who just want to do it themselves, but they don't want to spend the amount of money to get the good technology. The people who want to use their credit card, get live data, get hands-on, and maybe they have a really small budget. And, there's options for people to get into geofencing when you have a small budget, but it's not uncommon for someone to take a 300% margin because they need to eat too, which is completely okay in my opinion. So that's where we developed Qujam, which is it's using the same technology that we use, but I like to consider it the Facebook boosted post version of geofencing.
Love that.
It's simplified.
Yep.
It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it allows you to do two forms of geofencing. It allows you to do polygonal drawing, so you can actually draw around a specific location. So if you're an industrial and you have this, these list of customers that you want to go after, and they have these big factories, well, instead of going after the whole factory and geofencing that, well, just draw it around the offices that you think that they're sure. Then it also does addressable geofencing, which can take a list that you provide and we upload it into the system and it'll automatically grab the property lines. That's really nice for residential, for big lists, those kind of things. It not only uses GPS data, but it also looks at other data points to identify that a device is connected to a specific address. So there's that little extra layering. And then it also does video pre-roll, OTT, and display advertising, because that's got the most inventory in the geofencing space for us. So we made it accessible for anybody and everybody. So we have, industrial folks, we have laundromats, we have restaurants, we have politicians, a number of different people who are like, I just want to go on there. I can register for free. I can do a $1 a day campaign if I want. I can do a $10,000 a day campaign if I want. If you want to do that, I would actually recommend working with us because we can give you all the bells and whistles. But you can really have the freedom to be in control of your campaign and test it out and see how it goes for you. There is an element of it's kind of like giving an 8-year-old a lighter and a can of gasoline. They could do something cool with it. They could blow themselves up as well too, because we've seen people get on there and their creative is just really not good.
Sure.
Or their landing page is really not good. I've seen campaigns where people set it up and they're doing this massive area versus using it for geofence. I'm like, okay, you don't need to do that because you could just do zip code targeting and that's cheaper. So we try to do as much education on there as possible, but we created a tech platform that allows people to basically do geofencing themselves.
Great. Well, and congratulations. And I think many of the credits that you guys have achieved in this is it is a do-it-yourself platform. It's as scalable as you want it. So if you want to do it yourself, that's there, and there's great educational resources. If you want some help, you guys are available for consultation. Mm-hmm. If you want to do it for me, you guys also have that layer that you can just kind of take it over, getting that $10,000 a month or beyond. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you probably want a professional to take a look at the Ferrari and make sure it runs well, as opposed to if you just got one of those soapbox cars, you're cruising down the hill. Yeah. So, no, that's great. Well, Jeff, exciting to hear about that part of your story and what you've done. And what I'd like to do now is transition into more of an educational conversation about geofencing, because obviously you have the experience and you've done so many things with it, not only participated with it, but kind of become a master of your domain in providing so much access to our audience and any audience for that. So when we look at some of the benefits of geofencing, some things I gathered from your website and from online resources: precise targeting, reduce wasted ad spend, personalization and segmentation, customer loyalty. Those are like 4 biggies. What do you feel is the most important? Or if, like, let's say a marketing manager is going into the C-suite or to their manager and saying, hey, I want to promote this as an idea. What do you think they should focus on and prioritize in their communication as this is the most important thing we can do with geofencing, specifically from an industrial B2B standpoint?
So, I mean, the right answer is what's the most important thing to the C-suite individual? Right? Sure. Because that could be different, because all 4 of those things, all 4 of those things are going to be valuable, right? And geofencing can assist with all 4 of those things. That said, geofencing, like all advertising and all marketing efforts, in my opinion, are not silver bullets. It's one thing that magically changes everything. So having it incorporated into a very good holistic strategy is going to be where you're going to get the best results. So if you have a very good converting website, great. If you have a good sales team that knows what they're doing, great. If you have good creative, that's vital to something like this working. a search component, all these other things working well together. Now, that said, obviously geofencing can be very precise for your target audience and reduce a lot of that waste. Those kind of two things go really hand in hand, and some people might like that. And that kind of depends on what you're already doing.
Sure.
If you are doing something that's more broad, like if you're in industrial and for whatever reason you're doing TV advertising in your area, or billboards actually could be even be more appropriate. Well, you're reaching a lot of audience that has a lot of waste. Very low cost per thousand on some of those things, but a lot of audience members means pretty expensive.
Sure.
So this could actually reduce the amount of waste that you have by targeting the individuals that you want to target because they're in a specific location. And it's a lot more precise. Instead of being in the general area that your customer's in your industrial field with something that's more broad reaching, you're doing something that's a lot more specific to those individuals. So I do like it for those components. So
Sure.
That's kind of a comparison of what you've already been doing, right? Versus what you could be doing. Personalization and segmentation, and then customer loyalty. I think that especially for industrial where you have a lot of repeat buyers and you're trying to get in front of them, maybe you're trying to get to that meeting, you're trying to get customer loyalty to contact you first. It's a nice little reminder to have that drip campaign, and you can personalize it as well too. Let's say that you are a sheet metal cutting manufacturer. You have all these different machines, and that you know that there is a certain category of your target audience that would be interested in some of the larger mass production machines, and then maybe you have your smaller shops that can't handle those. So you actually change the creative. You can personalize it to those different locations, and you have big machining geofencing lists, and you have small machining geofencing lists. And you can go after it that way. You can't legally actually say, "Hey, Joe, buy from Bill," But that's a big no-no. But you can do things because you're trying to figure out, okay, what kind of audience we have to customize the creative messaging, both in the ads and in the landing pages and with your website, to help personalize it quite a bit more.
Great. So one of the things we look at in this space, and I guess there were 3 early promises of geofencing. One was location-based offers, which I think geofencing has completely delivered on, right? We can do location-based offerings. All of the things you've talked about, the polygon, the addressable, we can dial in data to locations. Mm-hmm. There's 2 other, early promises of geofencing, and I'd just like to get your feedback as to what you've seen as how these have developed. One would be competitor conquesting, and then the second would be audience nurturing. You spoke a little bit to the audience nurturing already, so we can maybe put a green checkbox by that one. But what about competitor conquesting? Because I hear less about that today than I did maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Do you see, is that an emerging opportunity, or is that something that didn't really materialize as well as we had hoped in the geofencing space?
Depends on the industry, depends on the business, as well as COVID are probably the 3 things. And actually for you, the 4th thing is because of your specialty.
Right? Sure.
So geoconquesting is kind of how we refer to that. It's really good whenever you're trying to go after your competitor's location.
Okay.
And there's an audience that will go there that you can then try to steal that audience back over. A good example is if I'm McDonald's and I want to get Burger King, people who are going to Burger King, well, they're going to eat again and they're probably going to buy at a restaurant again. So if I can get those people to see McDonald's ads and I know that they've been to a fast food place that's in my area, that's a really good case study. Now, if you're talking about industrial manufacturing, how many people are actually going on site? And
0.
And seeing that. Exactly. Especially with COVID.
Sure.
So there's a lot less movement that had happened with COVID to make that happen. So the competitive geo-conquesting doesn't translate as well between all categories and all industries. Now, where that, in this space where it could maybe be, very beneficial is knowing that, hey, they do go into the office, but they go into their office. Or
Sure.
There's a event-based geofencing component where, well, there's a trade show coming up. We can maybe grab some of those as well too. And don't get me wrong, geofencing, and I want to make this very clear, geofencing has its limitations. It's not like every single person that enters a geofence is going to get served an ad. There are a multitude of reasons why they would not get served an ad, from their collection process. They have GPS turned off on their phone, which about 10% of phones in America have that turned on. They have ad blockers enabled. And then it's also a bidding system as well, too.
Sure.
Say we're going after a high net worth individual that's making some good money because they're one of the decision makers you're going after. Well, okay, then maybe so is Audi and Lexus and Ruth Chris Steakhouse, and they're all bidding on the same inventory in real time, and we're bidding on that as well too. So there's a lot of things that can happen, and then even the nature of the geofence that you put up. Event-based geofencing tends to have a lot lower success rates because it's a small period of time. There's some Wi-Fi interference with these big convention centers that could take effect, and some of these other things as well too, where something that's longer term and something that can kind of exist a lot longer, like an office, let's say, or home, or even like a general kind of area of a business sector, that's going to be a little bit more successful of a collection rate as well too. And there's validation that happens with the technology. It just isn't instantaneous. The system wants to actually validate that there actually have been there, which takes maybe a day or two to kind of complete its cycle after one day. So there's a lot of different elements that there's got to be a big enough audience that you're going after to grab them. So if you're going after one competitor that has no foot traffic of your clientele going in there, well, A, your people aren't actually there, and then B, it's not enough foot traffic to really kind of make that difference, because you have to play a numbers game to have all these factors be kind of washed out.
So maybe, and this is a broad brush conclusion, but competitor conquesting in this space is probably most likely more for a D2C or a high throughput location program for geofencing, as opposed to what it would, it sounds like a great application for, turf wars over pizza in town, or a dog kennel or dog grooming business, and you have a competitive dog grooming business 4 blocks away or whatever. So that's an easy decision. When we look at most of our clients, we're dealing with really long purchasing cycles, a lot of loyalty, and then you have to really displace. So it's not going to be, we have cheap lattes today, and they're going to divert to the new coffee house.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you're going to have to provide a really unique value proposition that's going to wear well over time, and probably have your current provider mess up for you to really think about that opportunity. So maybe there's less of an opportunity there, but that's great, because what we're here for is to discover what's missing, or would discover what's a possibility. And maybe this early promise of geofencing does hold true for D2C, but isn't really great for our market, which is a good discovery for our audience to understand what they should and shouldn't be promoting, because we want to prepare our marketing manager community to have good conversations with their management and their owners and C-suite. And I had a client the other day ask me about geofencing, and great, glad they're interested in learning. But then the question they asked and the application they were looking for was 100% wrong. And it was going to be a complete waste of money. So it's good to really explore like kind of the bookends of what's available in this space.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of different things with it. If it's aluminum, my dad was in aluminum extrusions for his entire career. If it's aluminum, you can do extrusions, you can do sheets, you can do a whole bunch of different things with it. But it's at the end of the day, it's still aluminum.
Yep.
It's geofencing. But you can do a whole bunch of different things, a whole bunch of different tactics for it that can be very valuable to a whole bunch of different organizations and industries. But that doesn't mean that every tactic is going to be applicable for every single industry as well too. So geoconquesting, I don't really see that being a space for it. However, we did it for a manufacturing company that only cared about 400 offices, distributors in America. And so we targeted 50 of them with geofencing, and their sales leads went up 150%. And it leads more into the fact that it is a longer sales cycle, right? So when you're talking about your kind of audience, there's got to be a pain point that causes them to want to solve it. And it's got to be a big enough pain that's overcoming the other pain in the butts that they're dealing with, So there's a timing component. And what this does is it kind of ensures that a small, desirable audience can see your brand and your message on a consistent basis, because as a salesperson by nature, you don't know if that phone call, that email is coming at the right time and everything. But if you can automate that with a little bit of advertising, and the nice thing in this space is usually a nice high ticket item compared, and so the ROAS, the return on ad spend, tends to be pretty nice if you get results, because usually it's, you're not selling a cheeseburger, you're selling something else.
Sure.
And everything, but your audience is much more targetable and narrow than the wide audience that's going after a cheeseburger or a shirt or a car.
So let's talk about that case study for example. You had an industrial manufacturer targeted they had a very niche audience. So not only were they a niche manufacturer, they had a very finite niche audience, and you guys targeted their clients. And one of the things I think we need to communicate to the marketing manager community that we represent in industrial is geofencing. When we talk about that for D2C, is generally offer driven, location offer driven. What do you see for the industrial space as far as the right mix of branding and offer, or should we lean more into branding in these type of examples? Because I'm sure, my guess, and I don't know, hopefully you'll share with us what you can, the campaign you did for this industrial manufacturer who had like this 400 small target audience. It wasn't buy now, or right. It was more like, hey, we can solve your problems. We have make them brand aware, make them problem solution aware, as opposed to here's your coupon for your industrially manufactured product you can pick up this afternoon. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about branding as an important content vehicle or strategy in that type of industrial approach to geofencing?
Yeah. And I'll kind of flip it on this with you doing the podcast,
sure,
and social media. Do you ever pick up the phone and call somebody and like, oh man, I saw you. We were recently on something and I was just meaning to talk with you.
Sure.
It's the same kind of thing.
Sure.
It's one of those things where it makes them more likely to pick up the phone when you call, as and if you're in this B space, there you have a sales force usually, right? So it's kind of aligning with what your sales efforts are. Are you doing emailing? Are you doing LinkedIn? Are you doing calling in person, trade shows, whatever it might be? But it kind of primes them a little bit and allows them to be like, oh, I should take this call, or I should even reach out to them because there's a timely, because I'm feeling this pain right now, and it kind of like triggers that, right? So people historically like to work with brands that they're comfortable with, some brands that they see and everything, as well as the creative that you can put out there not only gets your brand out there, but it can also, if you have benefits over, your competitors, you can display that. You can showcase why you have a better product or solution. You can showcase the pain as well too, and remind them that this is you're experiencing pain and we have a solution for that. So it's one of those things where in B2B, it's definitely a long-term play, just like all the sales tends to be.
Sure.
But it allows it to be in front of them on a more consistent basis that allows those closing ratios and those opportunities become more prevalent when your sales team does call. If you have problems with your sales team, that's something to address before you get into geofencing or really any other advertising as well too. But if you have a good, strong sales team, this should actually make their lives a little bit easier.
No, that's great, because one of the things we really talk about with our clients a lot is the 95-5 rule, in the fact that 5% of your market at any given time in B2B is actually buying, and we need to be available to them and more problem solution focused at that point, because they're either going to talk to you or they aren't. The 95, we need to be making them brand aware, problem solution aware, and creating that authority and familiarity, so that whenever they move into the 5%, they consider us or our clients as that solution to their problem, and will consider sending them the RFQ or including them in the presentation process. So I think as I've thought more about geofencing specifically in the B2B, and then we're going to circle back to some creative elements and some of those like more tactical items in the process. Yeah. It feels to me like the big opportunity is brand awareness in campaigning in those tight audiences, more so than, and what gets all the press, I think, in geofencing is more of the pizza wars, or like that's everybody understands that more, and it's more available to that market. But that feels to me like a big opportunity for marketing managers in the industrial and manufacturing and B2B space is brand awareness, and also potentially tied in with ABM. So account-based marketing, let's say we've got our top 100. These are our whales. This is who we want to own and aspire to. And we get that it's a long-term play. It might take us the next 3, 5, 10 years to pick up 1 or 2 every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And what are we willing to invest? Well, the reality is we don't have to invest that much to really make sure we're getting there. And we have other methods to do that as well in other capacities in social media and other ad platforms. But in this specific way, it's almost an insurance layer. And when you look at the long-term value of those clients and how much they can add to the bottom line, you don't want to leave any of it to chance, right? So if geofencing is another layer, like we've talked about, it's another layer in that holistic strategy. Why not?
Yeah, we refer to it as spider webbing, or going back to integrated marketing communication for going back to a textbook kind of thing. But if you think of a spider web, and each thread of the spider web is a different targeting tactic and a different medium and different creative, then the more of those spider webs that you have, and they have to be strong. If you have flimsy webs and not a lot of budget behind them, or they just aren't done really well, but if you have all these interlaced webbings, you end up with a larger, stronger, more effective spider web to catch your prey.
Sure.
And then keep a hold of them as well too. Once they're in the web, then you should have account-based marketing strategies and the sales efforts and retargeting and all these other things to be able to keep on dripping on them even more so once they're kind of captured in that net.
Sure. So Jeff, one of the other things I think that'll help our audience understand geofencing is let's talk about Qujam and the problems that you guys tried to solve.
Okay.
Because I think that will really, it illustrates your company, and we're willing to do shameless plugs, right? Like we're willing to plug our friends and people we respect in the industry. But also, I think you guys did a great job at Qujam of defining where there were problems and then solving them. And our audience doesn't even know what the problems were, right? In some cases. So we started from that beginner or intermediate level. So one of the things you talk about is self-service, which you guys absolutely addressed. And that, to me, sounds like that was kind of the table stakes, like the primary thing you wanted to start with. But then you guys moved on. And I like the way you frame this with the 6 closed doors of geofencing advertising. So, Jeff, if we could really talk about that, I think, because like, for instance, I don't think a beginner would understand the fact that high minimums were such a hurdle 3 to 5 years ago, even less than that in some cases. I'm sure you can still find providers today that have incredibly high minimums for this service that you guys are disrupting. So let's talk through some of those. Let's start with high minimums.
Yep. So a lot of options out there that are self-service have minimum spends in order to do it. Along with that, some of the options that are out there, they are complex demand-side platforms, and they, that can do way more than geofencing. So it might be one of those things like, oh, well, this is more than I can handle. If it's the Ferrari thing, it's like,
Sure.
This is a bit too much car for me.
Yep.
Right. But minimums have fluctuated and they've kind of done different things. The demand-side platform that we mainly utilize and that Qujam is built on was at $10,000 a month. It went up to $20,000 a month. And I think it's back down to 10 because of COVID, in order to just ad spend that you have to have on there on a consistent basis to maintain a certain level of status. And then the more money you spend, you can get some different price breaks, right? So there's a barrier of entry for that. Then you can go to vendors that utilize it, and they are going to manage it for you as well too. So there's a lot more service, a lot more people that are using that methodology. So then you lose the self-serve aspect, which some people like. But then you get managed service. So you get maybe a little bit less insight into what's going on and stuff, but you have at least theoretically specialists to help you out. With those, the minimums can be a little bit less, but sometimes there's still minimums. My agency likes to work with people who are going to spend at least $25,000 a project. That could be spent in a whole year, a little over $2,000 a month if we're just doing programmatic advertising, which includes geofencing. that for some people are like, I don't really need to do that much. I'm only caring about targeting these kind of things, or I don't want to have that kind of consistent spend or commitment, even though we do a 30-day cancellation policy. So there is not a big commitment, but there was this kind of hesitation of having to invest in something at a higher dollar amount than I was comfortable without even seeing it kind of work and how it works.
Sure.
So that's one of the things that we knew that we had to, that were one of the selling points that we wanted to address, because we had probably maybe 1,000 conversations or inquiries over the years of people that maybe a lot of them were tire kickers, but they asked us a question and it was too expensive, or they didn't want to do it, and then we couldn't send them anywhere. There was no other option that we felt comfortable. We could send them to somebody who's going to price gouge them, and I have nothing against that other than the fact that I don't feel right whenever I'm referring somebody over that. But I would tell them too, like, this so-and-so will do this, but they're going to have a really high markup, and you're not going to get that good of results from it. It just won't work out that well. So we wanted to address the low minimums, or having no minimums really, to see if that could service an audience that just seemed to be popping up on a consistent basis.
Well, no, I think that was key, Jeff, because one of the challenges we had in presenting this to industrial and manufacturing audiences, say 2, 3, 4 years ago, was this was going to be a small percentage test of their budget, right? This wasn't going to be the core. And to talk people into new technology and then having those larger minimum spends became a real barrier to entry for us. You've removed that. And I think that's one of those closed doors that Qujam has really changed and opened, right, for that community. The next one of this 6 closed doors, you have high rates and CPMs. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so CPMs are cost per thousands. I kind of touched on that. That's the cost to have 1,000 impressions, have your ad be seen 1,000 times. That goes really to people's bottom line. If you have a lot of people that are buying from other people, well, that raises the rate.
Sure.
If you have somebody who needs to or wants to take a very high profit margin, well, that raises the rate, and then you have less impressions and deliverables. The issue that we had is, for Ethic, we wanted to take what we thought was acceptable, but could still get the most bang for our client's buck. I mean, we're an ad agency at heart. Our job is to get the most for our clients. So we had to create with Qujam a system that was kind of on the same methodology, where it has very reasonable cost per thousands, but in order to do that, we had to automate it. We had to take the human element out of it.
Sure.
So we replaced human element with a lot of the human element with technology costs, but it kind of washed out a little bit. So if someone's going to want to spend a decent amount of money, they can actually get a little bit better of a CPM if they go through our managed service and we're helping them out.
Sure.
A little bit, kind of almost like a volume play. But with Qujam, it's not that much more for the cost per thousand compared to our managed service, which is better than some of the other prices that are out there. It kind of lands somewhere in the middle where it's a competitive cost per thousand that people should be comfortable with, where it's not meant to price gouge them and everything. It's meant to, for us to make money.
Sure.
But it's also meant to make it kind of appealing, where it's like, oh, spending $12 cost per thousand on display ads. Now it's $9.20 max.
Sure.
That sounds pretty,
which is a good value.
Yeah.
The other 3 closed doors that you guys really opened were really, to me, speak to your focus on user experience and convenience for your users, which would be providing the reporting dashboard, which you guys do, allowing people to take credit cards. Or your company to take credit cards, which, we're finally, I think, seeing in this entire industry a more convenient and efficient way to move money, as opposed to the billing cycles and all of the challenges. Especially, I go back long enough to remember the huge receivables and those problems that were probably more of a late 2000s issue and less of a today issue. And then the last one was the inferior tech. You guys have built a platform that is state of the art, that's really easy to use, and that allows your clients to take, and clients of Qujam to take advantage of, they can self-serve with lower minimums, great CPMs at a great value, and then they can measure and manage what they're doing because they have a great dashboard that communicates to them. So those 6 doors, I thought you guys did a great job of communicating that. And I think as our audience is looking at what they would want to do for geofencing, obviously Qujam is a great opportunity for them to do that if they want to self-service, or if they need managed services, that's also available.
There isn't like the two extremes. It's not the self-serve side of things of Qujam, and it's not just the managed service side of things. Ethics 17 people.
Sure.
And that includes the Qujam side of things as well. So if someone has a question, we want to hear from them on our platform for Qujam, or if they're a client of ours for Ethic, there's still that kind of white glove service that we're looking at doing, even though we want Qujam to be easy to use and automated. We didn't reinvent the technology. We built the technology that makes it accessible to anybody. So the technology is actually backed by a 200 engineer staffed, like they have all the targeting stuff. I would never be able to do that, but Qujam is the technology that gives you access to it. But for us, we're big on problem solving. We're big on, Qujam was born to try to, give back to the small businesses or the small marketing teams or the people who are just like, hey, I want to do this. I just can't find that right fit. So it was all intended to try to fit this little gap in the market, to provide a service that didn't really exist in this format prior to us creating Qujam.
One of the things I want to hit on with geofencing, and this was probably one of my earliest misconceptions, or maybe it was just the way the geofencing industry kind of evolved, was around, it was all static ads. And now we certainly have the opportunity to include video, OTT, pre-roll. What are you seeing in, you're watching a lot of campaigns for a lot of clients, you have experience in the industry, you talk to other folks. How is video outperforming static? And what are you seeing in the video kind of revolution that's occurring in geofencing?
Yeah, video is one of the most impactful mediums, and it has been for as long as video has really been around, right? So video can use sight, sound, motion, and emotion as well too, unlike any other medium. In the past, there's been a lot of people think of banner ads and they think of static. Well, those can even be animated GIFs or HTML5 files, so animated kind of components. But video is, the pros are being able to, if you have 30-second video and someone watches all of that, well, you have 30 seconds of visual and 30 seconds of audio to communicate that. That's a lot longer than 7 seconds that a banner ad is up.
Sure.
Now, OTT and video pre-roll are higher cost per thousand. So if I have $1,000 to spend and I put it on OTT, I'm going to get a lot less impressions than if I put it on display ads. Those impressions are going to be more impactful, but I get a lot more display ads. So my reach and frequency goes up, but my impact isn't as good with the display ads. So there's pros and cons to both. And that's why using a combination when available and appropriate of video, display ads, even digital audio, we can do this with native advertising as well too, can play a nice little kind of combining mix to really let it resonate with an audience. And then the other thing that does is it opens up inventory too.
Okay.
So, OTT with the streaming is interesting because it's really hard to get inventory on Hulu. It's high in demand. There's a lot of use of that. So there's limitations on inventory and supply and demand for all of these different categories. But if you're going after somebody's audience and all I have is banner ads, well, all that video and audio inventory that I could be in, I'm not in, and vice versa. So, those are some of the pros and cons between the two, but how video is outperforming banner ads, it always has brought more awareness. It has more of a psychological staying power. Most OTT is not clickable. Some video pre-roll is and some isn't as well too. So there's a little bit of give and take with that, but we find that video tends to give more of a longer lasting impact.
Sure.
But we really like to use all of the different components when we can, so we can get a good mix of reach, frequency, impactfulness in front of mind, and then there's that consistent basis of having all these different mediums that are at the ready. So when somebody opens up their computer or turns on their TV or opens up their phone, that we have the best chance of getting your message in front of them.
But I think one of the things that's interesting there is when we look at, so when we compare banner ads and geofencing to video ads in geofencing, certainly there's a cost differential.
Yeah.
However, one of the things we talk to our clients about is whenever we're doing all of the things we do at 50 Marketing for our clients and recommend that they do for their like in our Aim Reach B2B program, is that we are getting very narrowly focused and surgically striking a very small audience. So even if we're paying more for an ad to our key demo, to our ideal client profile, you're still getting your message to your ideal client profile. And I feel like this geofencing fits right in there because you're not just putting it out there on Times Square and hoping that ICP walks through, one of the 10 million that walks through that day. It's going to your audience. So I think that's where we can see, even though it's the cost is higher, the effectiveness is so much higher that it's probably very equivalent to what you're seeing there.
Yeah, and I like the return on investment, the return on ad spend analysis, but also doing it at a higher level of all efforts being done to get that person, because it's not like geofencing just doesn't perform 100% on its own.
Sure.
It's complementing the other things that you have going on as well too, and it's feeding off of each other. Google just did their study where I'm going to botch it, but it's people spend 4 hours of research on 7 different platforms across a certain number of days. I forget what the exact numbers are, but it just reinforces the fact that you need to have these multiple touch points, especially over the course of a longer buying cycle, to get somebody convinced enough to actually take the action that you want them to take. Fill out a contact form, request a quote, send the RFP to to your vendor, pick up the phone and call, be open to the call when it comes, respond to the email as well too. Even that, can be nudged in a certain way with advertising and account-based marketing.
What are the other, and this is something I don't know, do you guys have frequency capping? Because one of the things we're really doing a lot of work on in all of our outreach is trying to find that right mix of frequency. Because certainly if I go on Amazon today and I look at a pair of shoes, I'm probably going to buy a pair of shoes relatively shortly, right? In the next couple of days, I'm either going to buy a pair of shoes or I'm not. If I need to buy a car, that's probably a little longer because it's a larger purchase. When we're talking about industrial and we're talking about these major multi-million-dollar long-term commitments that take 3 to 6 months to investigate, 3 to 6 months to ramp up the supply chains and the tooling or whatever, and then start delivering and then integrating that into the end customer's factory or whatever situation. We have to recognize that we don't want to oversaturate our market with too many touch points immediately, like you would with those shoes. If I look at a pair of shoes tonight, they should hit me pretty frequently over the next several days. So you guys have the same frequency capping tools that we kind of see across other digital delivery platforms.
Frequency and recency capping. So the frequency capping, we can do like, hey, we don't want to serve more than 4 ads per 24 hours, 7 ads per 20, whatever it might be. The recency capping, so if I set up a geofence and it's going after my office, I go there 5 days a week. I enter that office on Monday. I can be targeted with ads for the next 30 days. I enter that office on Tuesday. Hey, I can be the next 30 days targeted with ads. We can also change that up a little bit. Well, let's try to get some of these people who aren't, went there, but then they aren't really there that frequently. And we can knock that down to maybe like 2 weeks recency. So after 2 weeks, someone will drop out. So if I go in one day, 14 days pass, and I don't go back into the geofence, I don't trigger it again, then I'm not going to be targeted with ads anymore. So we have those 2 different layers of capping that we could potentially do. That's on the managed side of things. We have a couple of standardized goals that will set some of those parameters on the back end in Qujam.
Okay.
It'll ask, like, do you just want to hit somebody over the head with it, or do you want to try to reach more people, less, but you're okay with doing it less times? So we have the little bit of that kind of like the hand-holding, do-it-for-you kind of thing.
Sure.
Qujam. But we can actually set those parameters when it comes to our managed service side of things.
Excellent. Interesting. Because that's an area we're trying to explore more in all of our programmatic and all of our outreach. So that's an interesting layer and component there.
Yeah, the system also does optimizations to try to get people that are going to convert and going to take the actions that we want it to. So it's going to push creative that seems to be doing good, a little bit harder than others. It's going to take that into account as it's trying to serve ads, because if someone doesn't click on an ad or doesn't take action that we want after a while, well, we're probably not going to serve them ads. The system's not going to serve them ads after a little bit. It's going to try to focus on some other folks as well too. So it kind of cycles through as well to try to get you the best results, which means that, you don't get that that fatigue, that
Sure.
ad fatigue for a couple of different reasons, but we can actually implement to make sure that we have those caps in place to really reduce any kind of fatigue that would be on there. And then for B2B, that means that, hey, you don't need as much of a budget because you're not over serving, and
Sure.
and your ROAS can just increase and be good.
So Jeff, you mentioned creative there. And I think one of the areas that geofencing has some unique delivery and targeting. Could you maybe highlight what do you see as different or the same with the creative we need? Like, some of the things we have to make sure of with our creative is always, good message, call to action, branding, triggering words, short and sweet, keep it fresh, have a great landing page. Size variations, of course, are very critical because we have the different, we're trying to get across all those connected devices and, just the regular do's and don'ts of fundamental creative. Is there anything in that a kind of big bucket of creative? Because we could sit here and talk for days about creative variations and performance and topography and all that. Is there anything you would like to highlight specifically for geofencing around the creative that we're going to deliver?
So depending on the geofencing campaign that you have set up, and we touched on it a little bit earlier as well too, that you can actually alter the creative based off of the type of audiences that you're going after. So if you can kind of categorize the different campaigns that you have based off of the people that you think are going to be going into geofences, then the creative can kind of be altered to that. But it's going to be very similar to any other ad creative as well too. All the things you said are important. And one of the things I think gets really lost, especially in B2B, is great, we're just going to target the people. Well, okay, but what are you going to say to the people?
Sure.
I always associate it with dating. I always associate with trying to find the one and everything. If you go on a date and it's with the wrong person, that's a bad date. But if you go on a date with the right person, you say the wrong thing, that's not going to end well either as well. You have to have the right combination of being in front of the right audience, the right person, and saying the right thing to get to a second date, to get to that next level. So the creative is critically important. If you don't have good creative, don't even bother doing geofencing. Put it into another initiative as well too, because poor creative is just in any advertising format is never advantageous for the advertiser.
When we look at budgeting for geofencing, and obviously, Jeff, you've managed a lot of budgets over the years. And when we started looking at the marketing mix, if we have marketing managers out there who are thinking about next year's budget and, hey, I want to put a test budget in for geofencing and try this in manufacturing and B2B. And let's not talk dollars because I think that gets a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Let's talk percentages. What do you feel is a great test percentage that they should try and allocate, and so that if it doesn't go well and they learn and it doesn't blow their budget and they don't miss their objectives, but they start to build some traction in the geofencing space?
Yeah. I think percentages is even hard as well too to estimate, because percentage of what size budget and
Sure.
everything. With something like this, you want to see some kind of traction in about 3 to 6 months. You also have to factor in your sales cycle. If
Sure.
you have a really long sales cycle, that can be kind of difficult. That could extend it into a 12-month kind of cycle. You have to factor in, well, what else are we doing to complement the efforts that we have going on? Are we combining it like that manufacturer that I mentioned? They combined it with their normal sales efforts to make sure that they also called those those locations, as well as all the other control locations as well too. But that can also help as well too. Like, do you have a coordinated sales effort and other strategies that are going with it to factor in? But I would say that if you're going to do geofencing in the kind of sectors that you're talking about, minimum 3-month test, probably more like 6 to 12-month test is what's realistic, I would say. And you want to factor in, from a budgetary standpoint, the number of locations and even try to estimate the number of people that are going to be at those locations. When we start running a campaign, and if we're going to do something with somebody and they're like, hey, can you figure out how many people are actually there yet? We can actually do like a micro, like $25 to run a campaign. We just have to have one ad that's live, and then we can actually get some data on the active traffic that's going on in there. And we can say, hey, there's about this many devices that we think that we can collect and serve ads to, and we can actually provide that information. But I would really kind of encourage at least that probably 6 to 12 month time period in this sector. I would encourage using multiple mediums. So not just display ads, but also getting probably video and audio in there. And they could be relatively small budgets. But you got to think about your ROI, and you got to think about your audience that you're going after as well too. And then that'll help dictate the budgetary elements as well too. And also, in all honesty, if someone has questions about it, they can hit me up and they're going to walk through all these things and kind of hold their hand a little bit and say, okay, if I were you, I would say you need to spend $1,500 to $4,000 or $5,000 to $10,000, $1,000 to $2,000. Give them a little bit of a range based off of the information that they can provide.
We are launching here in a couple weeks a live series where we're actually going to workshop things like that. That may be a great workshop where we could live with some of our participants in like a Zoom session with a worksheet and say, okay, for how many targets with how many people in it, this would kind of give you directionally a budget range. That might be a nice little add-on to this for those who would be interested in just kind of seeing what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because I think that the key I see for our clients and these marketing managers is they need to have this in the budget with a plan to defend it in advance, because in the industrial marketing space, you're not in 6 months into the year and management comes back to you and says, oh, hey, here's an extra $10,000 a month. What do you want to do with it? So we have to like do the homework and planning in advance.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll look at having that session, a live planning session to kind of, here's what the budget could look like. Here's what you could possibly do, and present this to management. And then obviously on the back end, we can execute with either through Qujam and self-service or through your managed services and execute that for our marketing managers.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, as well as I think that's like the best way to go about budgeting is you actually take it one step before that as well too. You figure out, what do you want to accomplish for the year? And then you figure out, well, what kind of budget do I need estimated to achieve those things? And then how do I divvy up that budget to get me the best results to achieve the goal that I have set forth? So that's actually the structure that I usually like to see, because then it's just a math problem. If I know the answer to the problem is to increase sales by 12.3%, okay, well, what do we need to do in order to get to 12.3%? We're sure about this kind of spend. Okay, how do we invest those dollars? Okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. We have a little bit of money left over. Maybe we should test this geofencing thing as well too. And then all those things, added together is what's going to, in reverse, get you ideally to that 12.3% increase in revenue.
Great. No, Jeff, this has been just, as always, just a pleasure. We go a long ways back, at least for people our age. It's a long way, right? And I'm sure in 20, 30 years, we'll be able to say we went really far back.
Yeah.
But I just want to congratulate you and the Ethic Advertising team on your success. Also, Qujam, your team at Qujam on your success. It's been great to watch you guys take a different path than we did. We niched on industrial manufacturing, B2B. You guys niched on more technologies and kind of ad budgets and hyper local. And but one of the things I always enjoyed about our conversations was not so much, one was learning about the techniques and the variations, but the core thing I think that you and I really hit it off on early on was what's true to our brand and what's true to your brand, which is value and integrity and trying to get the most for our clients for their money. Whereas I came up early in my career dealing with newspapers and radio and TV back in the early 2000s, where there was a ton of fraud that was exposed, overcharging. You certainly came up through some of that industry shuffle where, the internet and digital really blew that up because we actually had data. And one of the core values that we've shared is making sure that we're not participating in those type of practices, that we make sure our clients are getting what they pay for. Our motto is, the John Wanamaker, half my advertising is wasted. I wish I only knew which half. And, we're trying to find what in our clients' portfolio is not working and help them figure that out and what's wasted. And you guys with Ethic Advertising, you've been focused on that same type of approach from that ethical standpoint. So congratulations, Jeff. It's been a pleasure as always. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate you having me on here and all the kind words.
Thank you for joining the Missing Half podcast. We'll see you next episode. Have a great day.